I bet you've spent hours searching YouTube, Instagram, and the internet for soccer drills. And when you find them, the videos are not follow along, they're not easy for your child to use, and they don't go step by step. We created Anytime Soccer Training to solve this problem and more. Anytime Soccer Training is the only online training program with thousands of follow along training videos that are easy to follow, go step by step, and cover every area of soccer. And if that's not enough, the program is fun with hundreds of skill challenges, soccer games, leaderboards, and cool prizes that all kids love. So what are you waiting for? Save time with a program that works. Go to anytime-soccer.com today and get started.
Guys, welcome to another edition of the Inside Scoop. My name is Neil Crawford. I'm your host and also the founder of Anytime Soccer Training. The Inside Scoop, as you know, is a podcast dedicated to helping parents learn about the soccer pathways that would be available to their child if they lived in another city around the world. And this is a special treat because we're going to go to more than one city around the world. But here's the thing, by talking about youth soccer in other countries, especially when we get into the details, it really helps us understand youth soccer in the States. And to do that, I'm introducing a good friend, Coach Brett. Brett, you're a loyal member of the Facebook group. You have a lot going on, but because you bring so much experience to the table, I thought it would be really cool to get your perspective and share it with the members. And then, like we always say, people can chat you, DM you, comment on you, yell at you in the Facebook
Right.
group to get more insight on what you're saying. So welcome to the
Yeah.
show. I didn't
No, I
want to butcher
appreciate
your last name, so give us your
it.
full name and tell us
Yeah.
what
So,
you do.
so the last name is Rosenberger, German heritage. Came as a kid, kind of to your point. Grew up in a couple different cities as a kid. Then was military, bounced around, saw soccer in a bunch of different cities. Right. Played pro, a couple different cities again. And then as I started coaching, a lot of my coaching started off almost in a consultancy fashion. And so once again, saw soccer in multiple cities, and you see things that are consistent, things that are different. But that was kind of what drew me to your Facebook page in the first place. Was I just love the conversation. I think it's something that should be going on more. So I love kind of how you were throwing it out there and getting people talking about it.
Brett, thank you for being a good sport. I always tell people, don't read too much into this social media stuff. Some of it is we're trying to have these conversations. They are tough conversations because we're passionate about the subject. But
Right.
sometimes you gotta take a time out, disengage, recharge, come
Right.
back, share your ideas. I'm about to put a 3 comment minimum on myself though, pitch count, but that's for another show. All right. So where did you grow up playing soccer?
So I grew up kind of in two places. We had split time between New York City and then the Midwest in Nebraska, of all places. Had family in both. And so got all kinds of exposure to all kinds of people. Ironically, there was a huge international contingent even in the Nebraska. So when I got there, um, the clubs were definitely different, but a lot of my learning came from the international community where they were playing the pickup games down by the university, and I was down playing with them from as early as they would not kick me off the field. So a lot of that, and that was kind of a way of replicating what was going on in New York too. Because honestly, truth be told, that's where I was learning. I was learning from a lot of these international guys playing pickup more than I was learning in club at the time.
Now, at that time, how would you compare club so that we can get perspective? Club back then to now, so we can understand. Was it, yeah, like how
It's
many days
it,
a week did
it
you
wasn't it
practice?
wasn't the business. It wasn't the business it is today. Today it is one of my biggest complaints is somewhere along the way, and I think it was probably while I was overseas, at least when it started. But you've seen it steadily kind of throw on layers, and it's gone from being soccer first, where that was where the passion was, and now to me, honestly, like a vast majority is it's not that they're not doing soccer, but they are doing business first. Um, they talk about teams in terms of this is X amount of revenue per year that we're leveraging to hire coaches, leveraging to build fields, leveraging to they justify it, but it's still a business first and soccer second in a lot of ways.
Now, what I want to do in for this, and then we want to talk about overseas coaching and playing in that experience, is I want to the best that you can, give me any details that helps you form that opinion. And I'm gonna tell you why, because oftentimes in my podcast, I will go on record as saying, if I were to ask them, they would say, "Oh yeah, but we're doing this because we want to expand the game," or field rentals cost this and there's just no way around it. Or we try to do it this way, but parents, if they see a price tag of $1,000 and they see one for $2,000, they assume the $2,000 is better. I mean, so
Right.
people rationalize it in a lot of different ways. So give me, I'm putting you on the spot, an example of a situation where you're like, man, they're really putting business over soccer.
So there's a couple of these clubs that have kind of turned into quantity over quality. So you're talking about clubs now that have 3,000 members, 6,000 members. There's a club out here I think has 10,000 members. At that point, you're not a club, you're an association, or you're an administrative portal where people come in. And one of the things that I'll see is, let's say the kid on team 1 or team 2, depends on how deep they go, right? But they put their best resources, they put their best coaches, highest paid. They go, pay these guys top dollar for the market. And then you filter down to team 5. Team 5 is paying the same rates as team 1 and 2, and they ain't getting a fraction. In fact, team 5 is probably subsidizing team 1 and 2 to a degree. And so that's one where I understand business wise. You brought in the revenue because you decided I need that headliner team, that headliner coach, and that's going to be my marketing. But team 5, at least for me, it's kind of my way of thinking of clubs. Team 5 is also your club. So your club is who your team 1 represents you, but so does team 8 if you go that deep. So it better be representative of you. And when you watch a lot of these clubs, you say the playing style changes. So when people use a lot of words like curriculum and things like that, and I would say I could probably break those myths down within spending 24 to 48 hours with the club, and say, you use the word because you have to. There's a couple words I have to say in U.S. soccer. I have to say curriculum. I have to say development. I have to say possession style build out. I have to say these things because otherwise you're the only one that's not saying them. So people are going to go, walk down the street and go to the next one. The problem is very few clubs actually know what any of those words mean. I remember this is a little bit ago, 15 years ago, coaches, I had said something in a match and I said, hey, use the rondo. This is 15 years ago. And the coach is, what's a rondo? The opposing coach, hey, coach, what's a rondo? And I go, cool, this is what it is, blah, blah, no big deal. But flash forward 3 years, and the federation every couple of years picks up a new catchphrase, a new this and that, and suddenly everyone's an expert. 2 years later, and everybody's an expert on rondos. They're all doing them. I go, they ain't doing them right, but they're all doing them. So you kind of see this thing where there's so much energy put into the presentation of the club, and the substance is missing. At least for me, the substance is missing.
I get that, and I understand that. I live in an environment in an area where our largest club has probably 20,000 participants.
Oh wow!
No judgment, but it is what it is. I want to do a show where I explore what they call the drum major instinct. Martin Luther King talked about it, where it's not just financial incentives, but it's also this desire to be out front, this desire to poke your chest out, this desire to say we have the largest club in the area, this desire to say we're invited to all the important tournaments, this desire to say we host the important tournament. And I think if not held in check, what is naturally a good competitive instinct can turn into a drum major instinct where you're always trying to be out front. So thanks for that perspective, because we have size and then quality. And I don't think any reasonable person can argue that after you reach a certain point, something has to give.
There's a lot of guys how they justify it, because I've been with a couple clubs where they're going through that metamorphosis of that small or medium club to a bigger club. So I've listened to all the arguments, and I'm not going to say they're all the same, but a lot of them have been similar. And one of the things is in my head, what I hear is, okay, we're going to deliver quality by random chance, or we're going to deliver quality by design. And random chance is, well, if I'm big and large, percentage wise, out of say 20,000, 10,000, 8,000, whatever, these larger numbers, percentage wise, I'm probably going to be able to put a decent club together at the top of an age group or the top of a whatever, because I'm just going to pull from within. I've just got that many kids. The odds are in my favor that I may randomly stumble upon a good team. But what you'll see those teams will look very different from age group to age group. They'll talk about strong years and weak years and things like this when you talk to their staffs, versus some of the groups that try and do it by design, where they're consistently producing players of similar quality. And yes, there's still a range of, some kids just pick it up quicker, but there's not as much of a range. And like, there's only a handful of clubs that I've seen across the country where if I said, hey, our club is going to be playing club X, and I know immediately what to expect. I don't know the age group. I have no history with them. I just know the club, and I'm going to see this, this, and this, because that is how the club trains their players. Most of the time, you go to these clubs, and what you see could be anything.
Yeah, and then, so now that we talked about the clubs, and then we're going to go to Europe, I will add that it's a complicated situation because of the parents. And sure. I don't mean the parents as, a lot of people blame parents. I'm like, just because you had a kid doesn't make you crazy. People are people and they are consumers. And right. This is a very unique situation because they're able to see the sausage being made. Right. So even if you start off with all the best intentions, we have all been there. I've been there anyways. And you just, sure. And my buddy always say, he gonna see this and he gonna laugh. You trying to sell a salad at a McDonald's drive-through. So then it's like, so why am I saying that? Because if a club came out and said, we're going to provide a professional soccer service, this is what you're going to get, I don't got no problems. It's all that, like you said, all those other buzzwords and then all those expectations and then, youth to pro pathway and all this other stuff where you start getting into truth in marketing. Right. But I understand their plight because if they're really transparent, they're going to, if you go and tell a parent your child is not there yet, we have a plan for them, but it involves them playing on 2 teams down right now, you're losing them. Yeah. So what do you say?
I don't know that there is a silver bullet that fixes the whole thing, but I do think there are things that clubs can do to increase their chances. Let's say one of the big ones is a lot of guys, and it's a mistake. A lot of guys, when they're saying, how do we form our club? What do we want our club to look like? A lot of guys say, well, let's look at a pro club and let's try and copy that. And they like, well, the academy does this, so let's do like that because that's high end and blah, blah, blah. Well, one of the things at an academy level is they really don't engage the parents that much. The parents drop them off at the gate. They come in, and it's kind of a pure soccer learning environment, so to speak. There's flaws, but the parents are not as involved, and in some ways, it's almost standoffish. Like, parents, you're not part of it. Stand over there. And so a lot of clubs, I think, have taken at the grassroots have taken that same, because they just see, okay, that must be the way to do it, so we're going to do that. I think that's a catastrophic mistake. The parents, it's a different ecosystem down at grassroots, and the parents are part of a triangle. You got the player at the top, and you got the coach who represents the club, but you got the coach and the parent, and they're the foundation. And if you're going to push that one foundation off to the side, I think it's a mistake on coaching, because so many things. You're going to help control those conversations in the car right after the game. You can help set expectations so because the parents are just chirping to each other all game long. There's always that one expert over there. Oh, they should be doing this. This isn't right. You know, I mean, all that stuff goes on, whether they're right or not. I think you need to set expectations, because when they're not set, that's when the reality is different than the expectation. And that's when they get frustrated, disappointed, angry, motivated to go somewhere. I don't think clubs, I think it's been a mistake. We've tried to educate a lot of clubs. You need to have an active parent engagement platform, and you need to get to as many, and you're not going to get everybody, but you don't need everybody. I need 5 advocates over on that other sideline. So when the conversation starts to turn a little crazy, there's a voice of reason over there. And you're gonna, I think it's a mistake that the clubs have made. And part of the problem for me has been, you're putting yourself out there as the expert. We have the expertise of not only managing soccer, but managing the learning environment. And I say, I've got a big question mark on that expertise then, if you have no parent engagement program.
So I actually prefer the term parent engagement. I'm a little sensitive to the term parent education. Part of it is unfair, but part of it is just the connotations around it that I
Yep.
perceive.
Yep. No,
I'm a
true.
grown adult. I don't need education. I need to understand what your process is. I'm
Yep.
a whole adult. And so so I do need some consumer education in terms of understanding the game and blah blah blah, but I need engagement if I'm going to go down that road to understand your process. So I
Exactly.
prefer the term engagement over education. There could be some education and knowledge transfer within engagement, but
Absolutely.
this whole if they could just see that it's not about winning. I'm like, no, just tell me what you want me to know and how you want me to understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah,
So
100%, 100%.
So now I'm gonna throw something out to you that is completely random that I was talking to my buddy about, okay?
Okay.
And then we're gonna get to Germany. Completely random. And I want to understand more about engagement as well. I am going to produce a 1 or 2 page pamphlet, ebook. I always use my wife as the barometer. Knows nothing about soccer.
Okay.
And I'm going to create this pamphlet that says, if you are watching a game at this age, these are some of the basic metrics you could track.
Right. Yep.
And here are some from a team, maybe some from an individual. At the bottom, it will be reflections. And then the other page would give context. These are some of the things that coaches try to work on. Now, I know you're going to be agreeable in my face, but the bottom line is I can see how this could be a double-edged sword, because a parent can see something and then one day, hey, look, I got this thing. But what I'm basically trying to get at is we have to have something that if you don't want somebody to focus on winning, you can say, here is your homework. And like you said, it only needs to be 4 or 5 parents. So let me give you an example, and then you comment on it.
Yeah.
And the examples I'm going to give are from Rec Coach Neil Crawford. They got my license on Google. So don't get fixated on the examples. It's just the fact that you have to be a metric. So it could be as simple as, how many times does a team connect at least 5 passes? Whatever, and pick the age group. It could be a subjective one, like, are they checking up just before they get the ball or when they get the ball? It could be another one could be when they score a goal, is it how many times did they score a goal as a result of a sequence of at least 3 passes?
Yep.
Right. I'm talking watch the first 10 minutes of the game. How many times did your team touch the ball? I'm talking simple. Watch the goalie. One parent's watching the film and they're only watching the goalie. I'm making this up. Okay. This is totally random. Not random, but don't get so worried too much about the stats.
The minutia.
Yeah, the minutia of it. How many times did the keeper kick the ball over midfield? Now, that's why I'm saying that could be part of what you're trying to do. Maybe you're playing 2 years up and that's what they're doing. and you have a reason for that, or you're working on something. So it's not a right or wrong, but then that is a conversation starter. And then at the individual level, you can say, how many times did your child lose possession? How many times did they have successful passes? And then one thing I'm gonna start looking at is the first 10 minutes of a game, because that's about all the time I have to watch on a film. How many times did we touch the ball versus our team?
Yeah.
Those touches can be completely irrelevant. They
Right.
could just be you just passing the ball in the back doing nothing.
Yeah.
But that is also a conversation starter to say, okay, we touched the
100%.
ball twice as much as the other team, but our touches, like of the 100 times we touched the ball in the first 10 minutes, 70 of them were in the back. Why are we doing that? And is that normal?
Yep.
A one pager, this is how you might want to think about it. And then you would say these are some of the things at the age groups. It might be only two things at the U8. I'm making that up.
Right.
And
Right.
at U13, it could be 4. I don't know. I'm just gonna work on something to share it with you guys, and y'all can give me your feedback. Now that I said that, what do you think? Is that completely crazy?
Nope. No, it's so one of the things that we've done, and I've been banging on the drum on since we've been back over here, is to introduce as many objective metrics as possible. And a lot of coaches like to say, well, it's really subjective and it's all subjective. And I go, no. It's somewhat subjective. But the core foundational skills and concepts are true, and it has nothing to do with playing style. Controlling the ball, dribbling, passing, all these things are the same whether you come from Brazil, Germany, England, France, Cameroon. It does not matter. Those are all core inherent skills, and you have an ability to execute those at various levels. And sometimes you can use rate, count, all of these things along the way. The key part about objective metrics is it needs to be verified or verifiable by an outside party, not just the coach. Because right now, a lot of it is the coach said, even when the coach says, well, these are the important qualities. Well, how do I know if my kid's doing good? Well, the coach tells you. Well, that's a nice system. You know, I'm gonna be the one that verifies if I'm doing my job right. And if you don't believe me, just ask me. And so a lot of it is, I think it does a couple things. One, yeah, there's the occasional moment it keeps the coach honest, right? It keeps, because a coach maybe he's not paying attention. Sometimes young coaches get really wrapped up in the game. They focus on certain areas and miss other areas. So from a developmental standpoint, you're trying to work through a blueprint. If you say the team at this point should be able to make 5 uninterrupted pass sequences, and then later maybe we go to 10, or maybe we're going to stay with 5, but now we're going to put more purpose on those 5. Whatever your progression is as a club, there should be stepping stones that are very easily identifiable. And then that's the kind of stuff that I don't see coaches, clubs, talking to their parents about and say, look, hey, where we are today is we're just trying to get sets of 5 passes in a string. That's what we're doing. Realize step number 2 is we're going to begin to put purpose, but it makes logical sense to us that just being able to do 5 has to come before a strategic application of those 5. So understand you're going to see a bunch of passes. We're just going for 5. We're going to encourage them to get 5. They will make passes that do not make sense. Don't worry about it. This is if you know how we're putting the player together psychologically, as long as you understand the process. Now, once again, kind of to your point earlier, now the parents' control is if they listen to that process, go, this is a bunch of garbage. Okay, cool. Then you can go down the street and say, I don't like that process. But at that point, if you've agreed to the process and the coaches stick to the process, then we should ride that out.
So let me throw 2 things at you. Number 1 is from a youth soccer perspective, based on your generalization of all the clubs you worked at and teams you consulted and your playing experience, is it unfair if the coach has only a year with the team? So at my younger son's club, they may only have 1 year with a team, and until they get a little bit older, and then also the teams can be a little bit in flux. Where my older son's team is so tiny, it's been the same kids together since they were 8. And so I do think it would be very unfair to judge them the same way. So what do you?
Yeah, yeah. It's so the way that it, at least my experience, right? Everyone kind of goes back to what what they went through. And for me as a coach, so I started my coaching at the academy, and so I have a lot of those influences on how I kind of see and look at these systems. One of the things would be, at least how my academy works, our director sat down, and even within an academy, there's variance between teams. This team has been together a long time, kind of like you said. This team is brand new. This team's deficient, whatever. And we would take the club overall curriculum, and then we would sit down at the beginning of the season and have a discussion. Coaches would give their input on the players, the director would give his input, but then we would establish these are the metrics that we're going to apply to this team for 1 year, and this is the progression that we should see from the alpha to the omega. And we should see, say it's 5 passes. Okay, they're starting at 5 passes. They can do it. We just saw them do it a number of times. I expect it to be 15 passes, and I expect all but 2 kids to be able to be part of that by the end of the year. Whatever the math is, and you have to make it reasonable, because you can have 2 teams in one age group and say this team is not. It's the same. We'll still be talking about passes and metrics because that's what our club believes in. But maybe team 2 has to get to 12 or 8 or whatever the number is. It may not be. Maybe it's 15 for team 1, and maybe it's 8 for team 2, because they're just a little bit behind in the same class. And for me, it's like math class. So you've got your advanced math, you've got your regular math, and you got your residual math. So they're all working on math, and at some point they're all working on geometry at some point. But I'm working on it when I'm ready for it. And maybe the fast kids over time move through it quicker, and they're ready for new lessons. But it's the same pathway that standard class is doing. They're just a little bit behind, maybe because they don't like math.
Yeah. So you said something in our conversation about actions that you measure with the kids, and I hope it was you. I have so many of these conversations.
Yeah.
So what can you elaborate on that again? Can you remind what is that about?
So we took, and this, when I say we, this was a group we formed a couple years ago. This was a couple coaches from different countries called Magellan International Sport Academy. And we had similar ideas on the game. Okay, not the same, but similar ideas and different perspectives. We all had some belief in long-term athletic development. We all had some belief in trying to incorporate scientific research. So some of the things that drew us together initially was what we called windows of optimal trainability. It's a long phrase, but basically saying your body is
going like this.
I know, right?
Think about it.
Basically, it's saying, look, there are just sweet spots in most kids' ages where their body, their mind, their emotional state is more prepared for some lessons, and then later they're more prepared for other. So think physical. If I want to develop, if I want to really have physical, I'm really going to get more bang for my buck in ages past peak height velocity. So past about 14 and a half. I spend a minute on physical, I'm going to get about a minute of gain. But if I try to spend a minute on physical when they're 8, I'm going to get about 20 seconds of gain. Whereas if I would have spent time on technical, I could have spent a minute on technical, I'm going to get about a minute of technical gain at that age. So it kind of started with that. And then we built out the curriculum. It wasn't terribly different than what other top clubs have done. Like there's some nuances here and there and some preferences, but you start to see there's a way to build skills, concepts. Spatial orientation doesn't kick in until about a range from 11 to 13. So when coaches are telling 8-year-olds to spread out and maintain spacing, you're like, come on. I mean, the kids do not have the mental capacity. I mean, 1 or 2 will get it, but they're probably doing it not for the right reason. They're doing it because they're pleasing the coach. They're doing it because dad's over there on the side, whatever. They're doing it, but not because they understand it. So you're wasting a lot of time pounding that lesson in at those ages. So he said, what is the way to do this as fast as we know how and work through this? And then what we did was there's always been this thing, and this is probably where I think we're a little different. Everybody has always been fascinated with, hey, how come Brazil won so many World Cups in the 90s? So they go ask Brazil, and then Brazil is forced to come up with a reason. And the reason was actually nothing. There's a lot of people from Brazil during that window that came up with all these, this is the Brazilian formula. And there was no Brazilian formula. It was, they played in the favelas, they played pickup soccer until about 12. And then from 12 to 14, there was a Brazilian method. And then after 14, most of them switched to a German method after that and then continued out. So I go, but you didn't want to say that because that doesn't sell books and that doesn't, schedule dates and things like this. But they do this with every country. I mean, even France, when they try to go through France, they skip telling everybody that a massive number of those kids came from one neighborhood in Paris. So all these guys on the national team, it's not because you have this wonderful program running throughout the country. It's you have something happening in this one neighborhood that's producing 75, 80% of your players. And so, people feel compelled to do this. Everyone's looked at like futsal. Okay, futsal must be, lots of touches and lots of decisions. And I love it. I agree completely. But one of the things that everyone started doing that kind of on the more serious side is they said, all right, so we get that that's how they got there, but we can't reproduce that. It's so random. And there's a lot of kids that also played all those things, did all those things, played pickup soccer in the favelas and didn't go anywhere. So it's not a very efficient way to try and recreate the magic. And so a lot of people are saying, how can we reproduce that? How can we do this? Is it more touches? Is it more this? Is it more that? And one of the ideas we came up with was something we called forced sampling. It doesn't sound great. We actually need a better phrase for it, but we call it forced sampling. And what we do is we would say, all right, kids, we're going to work on these technical skills. They should translate into 1v1s. And we're going to keep working on them until they do. And and as a coach, I'm not going to force you how to do it exactly, but we're going to force you to try. And try and try and try and try. And the concept isn't so much that you're going to get better because of the directive coming from us. We're there to tweak, give feedback, see if we can cut some corners for you. But what we needed you, if you're going to get better at 1v1s, I need enough material to work with. Get out there and get me over the course of the season, give me 250 101s. And I don't care if 240 of them end in failure. That's feedback. That's kind of, as you said before, that's a moment to talk. That's a moment where we can have a conversation and we can hopefully make attempt number 251 a little better. But what we were doing is we said, look, by forcing 1v1s, 2v1s, certain types of passes, certain types of concepts, moving the ball this way and this way, the value wasn't so much in the brilliance of the instruction, although, of course, all of us want to say that's part of it. But really the value was we were able to take a kid and say, go through one season. If I'm able to get you 250 attempts, whereas you go to a club down the road and maybe they're doing great instruction, but when they get to the game, pass, two touch, da-da-da-da-da. That kid's going to walk out of that season with about 30 reps on actual 1v1s. And I'm sorry, after 2 seasons, now, at some point, I'm so much further ahead in reps that it's going to be very, very hard to catch up. And what you look at a lot of players is they say, look, I've got to move the ball one of 3 ways. We say one of 3 ways. I have to dribble, I have to pass, or we would say combination. There's a combination play, and there's a specific reason we keep that separate than passing. But of those 3, the hardest one to learn is the hardest one.
The hardest one is what?
Is dribbling.
Dribbling. Okay.
Dribbling 1v1s, and that's why, like when a lot of guys up at the national team level, well, we got these guys and they're good system players, but nobody can break them down on their own. We don't have enough guys who can beat players one-on-one. I go, that's right, because your system kicked all that out immediately. Like when they're telling 10-year-olds to play 2-touch only, and I go, that does not match the science. These kids should be going after players and taking one-on-ones over. Your body is primed. You are in your primary learning window. Your body is you're hardwiring a lot of mental connections on how to coordinate the muscles. Like this is the time. Go get as many 1v1s as you can. And then obviously you don't want a guy just dribbling up and down, not playing team balls, but you can connect it. You can say, look, I'm going to give you a point for beating a player. And then step 2, now you've got to beat a player, but you have to complete a pass after you beat a player. I have to connect the 2. And you begin walking the kids through these pieces. And suddenly you've got kids who are beating players, confident beating players, skilled in beating players. and then you start going down. And for us, one of the things, like when you talked about the Germans, one of the things I stole from the Germans, of course, they write everything down, right? They document everything. Well, my director said, he goes, if you tell me the number of 1v1s that the kid complete at these ages, I can tell you what his passing accuracy is going to be at 16. And of course, I go, but I said, yeah, sure. Right. I don't agree. And then you see it play out. And then I came back over to the US, and then one of the questions he asked me is, he said, Brett, he goes, we've only ran those numbers in Germany. Maybe there's a cultural thing about that. He goes, are you going to keep doing the same over there? And I said, yes, I am. He goes, well, I'd be curious to see what the numbers play out over there. And they played out the same, which I thought was interesting. I thought they would be different. And they were the same. Same amount of passes, same amount of passing accuracy later on. And there's some reasons for that. But the point being is there's a structure to it. There's a process to it. The kids, number one, I could start walking away from a game, win, lose, or draw. And I go, and this is the thing, it's like so many other sports. If I go play basketball and we lose, but I got 20 rebounds, I still feel pretty good about myself, right? I got 20 rebounds, okay? Or I got 15 assists, or I got 6 steals, or, whatever. Like there are those sub metrics within the game of success. If I play football, if I rush for so many yards, if I, get so many tackles, like every other sport we have has this. So why can't soccer have it? And that's been where like where I've seen where people get caught up on the metrics has been people try to define the metric too much and say, look, give me the outcome, and then let the kid find a way to get that outcome. Make it a priority. Say, look, I need you to get 5 moves today. It's a priority. Build the culture to where you celebrate it. You celebrate the kids that get the 5 moves. The next kid wants to get 5 moves, blah, blah. And then when hey, coach, how do I get the 5 moves? Right, well, we're teaching you different moves. You pick. What's your favorite move? Should I beat him this way? Should I beat him that way? Yeah, right, do it. Should I beat inside, outside? Yes, all the above.
See, Brett, it took all the discipline in the world not to interrupt and just start clapping. So there's a few things. I'm going to give my reaction and then give you what I would think some people would push back on. So number one is in other sports, see, it's important to remember that soccer is intrinsically harder to evaluate because it's
Very
just the
much so.
nature of the game.
Yep.
Period. End of discussion. So if I watch basketball, I know your shooting percentage. Somebody just posted Jason Allen. He's Duke basketball, former Duke basketball player. That's why I know him. He used to play for Duke, and I lived in Durham. Plays for Milwaukee. A great role player, but he's the only player right now in the season that has like 50% field goal percentage, 40% 3-pointers, and 90% free throws. And I know his fantasy numbers are off the charts, but the bottom line is it's not easy, but it's so much easier, right?
100%.
And now in basketball, they even have hustle stats. So they have stats that says this is how many balls you deflect. This is how many screens that you set that led to an assist, because that wasn't even captured. Football, we don't have to talk about. Football is like watching a football thing is like watching a NASA space launch. They got so much data, right? So we got that part. And I think we do have to come to Jesus moment to say soccer is just not so neat to quantify or so easily to see. And we need to be sympathetic to our parents who are watching this stuff saying, we got to give them something because it's just not something that any normal person will understand. This next thing is I was going to ask a question about the movements. Now, when you define these actions that you want the kids to do, and you said 1v1, but do you define, hey, I want you to do the L behind or the Cruyff, or I want you to do this, or you let them figure out which 1v1 move are they going to do, or is it some combination?
Combination for us, and I work with some clubs who have ended up liking that pathway, but defined it differently than how I will define it, and that's fine. That was kind of from them. What we did was we said, look, we put 5 core moves. We said these are the ones you should be proficient at. Then there are more moves, and we will teach those. and you can sample them. And as excited as you are to pursue any of these moves, we want you to do them. But we said, now, your goal at the end of the day, and this is what we've usually told the kids, your goal at a minimum, and this is part of kind of who we are. This is part of being in our, in our system. You're going to be very good at 3 of them. One of them, we're going to tell you the first one. First one's going to be simply that fake and push. I'm just going to throw that fake. Why? Because the kid can get the most success. It's the fastest move. I can pull it out in any situation. It is your go-to, and it helps the kid get hooked. Because, hey, I had success with that. Maybe I will try this L move. Maybe I will try Beckenbauer, Freud, whatever, whatever. But we would say, then the next 2, we would say, it can't go by position, but we would say, you need one bottom of the foot move, a roll, a drag, a pullback, a Cruyff, any of these, roll step over. And we said, that's for when you are at slow speeds, and maybe the defenders, all kinds of versions. And then you need one fast move. And it could be a scissors. It could be, it could be anything. And we said, look, after that, you pick. So really the only one we defined was number 1. Like fake and push, and that was first. Fake and push is going to be one of your 3. That's going to be. Number 2, you pick. Here's a list of 4 or 5. There are more. Here's 4 or 5. You work on the one that you like. Here's some speed moves. Here's a list of 6 or 7. You pick the one that you, and we would still take them through and sample all of them. Because honestly, how does a kid know if he likes a roll step over if he's never done a roll step over? Or if he does it wrong? Then you say, no, I know you don't like doing a wrong version of roll step over because it doesn't work. But that's why it's wrong. So let's correct it. Let's get it accurate. Then try it. And then at that point, if you don't like it, we move on and we'll find another one.
Exactly. And there's a lot of, and I'm going to put my Tom Byer hat on. There's a lot of brain science out there. This is general brain science. This says if you teach them that fake and push and you build that elasticity, there's so many ways that they're going to use that with the other stuff that you don't even, it's too strong of a word to say you don't have to worry about teaching it directly. But between the influence, the peer influence, when they have that down, they're going to blow you away with stuff that you didn't even think about.
You see it. It's one of the things that I love is you get these kids, you get these foundations, you get these basics, and then there's always phases where you let them play with it, and they start coming up with stuff. And there's stuff you see, okay, I've seen that before. And every now and then you see a kid come up with something, you're like, I've never seen that. That kid just invented a whole new move right there. And a lot of times it's 2 simple moves sequenced together, but he does it so fast and he got rid of that little pause between them. Anybody watching knows that's one move. That is one continuous move, even though in his head it's different.
And at the fear of this podcast episode being 3 hours, it is what it is. But I do need to throw this out there to my parents, that as a parent of 2 boys, they have different personalities and they practice the same types of moves. But my older one, very clinical. He's going to do the bare minimum to get by you and move.
Yep.
That's it. That's his personality. And as a parent watching him, I used to get so frustrated in my earlier soccer days because I was like, man, when you practice all this stuff, if you just did this, you would die. And he was like, when he got older, he was like, Dad, I do what I need to do to get by this guy. And that's just my personality.
Yeah.
And I had to just let it relax and say, yep, you got it. Now, my younger one, he's all over the place. And I'm like, bro, you could just be a little bit more direct. So I want our parents to understand that the brain works in mysterious ways. You may practice, 2 kids may practice the same 10 moves. One kid may only use 2 and be deadly. Another kid can use 8 and be just as effective or ineffective. It just doesn't work so neatly.
Yeah, there's no formula. I've seen pros, I played with pros that had a book of moves. And so, they were in trouble all the time. I saw other guys that had maybe 2 go-to moves. That's it. But they were experts at those 2 moves. And they would get the same end result. They would get past that guy. Yeah, it's the same move, but honestly, what do you care? He got past him. And so if he can get by him enough times to cause problems, What do you care if he used the same move over and over and over again, or if he used 10 different ways? As long as he is getting past him. And obviously the kid with 10, he can maybe adapt to some more situations, maybe hypothetically, but I have seen players that, I mean, you probably see, everybody's seen that video where Messi does that little, we call it Messi double tap, that little drag and tap through like 7 guys with the exact same move over and over and over all the way to goal. Every guy knew it was coming. There's no way that the scouts or the analysts on the team said, watch it, he likes to do this move right to left. And even with all that knowledge, even with everything, those they're pros getting beat by the same move over and over and over again. I go, if you're just that good at it, then and Ronaldinho, boy, yeah, don't get me started, but Ronaldinho, that dude was a master at moves. You could know what's coming all day long. I don't know if it's going to help you.
So right before we pivot off of this, the pushback you're going to get is, oh, well, you micromanaging them, or you disrupting the creative process.
Yeah.
What do you say about that?
That's not my experience. In fact, my experience is the dead opposite. I go, if you watch a team that's played with us, most people come up, and let's say a while, not a long while, a while. People come up and go, we've never seen teams play like this. This is amazing. The creativity, the this, the that. And I go, you would be absolutely gobsmacked if we told you how we got all this creativity. What we've done is creativity, at least, and for me, and this was definitely a military thing. Creativity is simply it's 2 things: having more options than what your opponent has. I have more options to choose than what you're ready to defend, and I have an ability to work through those options quickly. So there are some certain things that are a little bit more universal. Like, for example, all these moves, my ability to select different moves jumps if I'm squared up on the player. If I'm dribbling center of mass, I've got equal options left and right. I've maximized my angles. The angles that I could pass out, even if I pass, I've maximized angles off on the 45 degrees. So I put you dead center. I've also delayed the response from the defender behind you, because you have to respect, I might go left, I might go right, and I'm going to hide it until the last second, as opposed to the kids that race around to the right, to the left, and use a little bit of speed. Well, now that defender gets an early warning about what's coming and where it is. So we would go through all of that and say, look, this part is kind of at least how we teach it, this is the non-negotiable part. You're gonna get squared up. Now pick what moves, pick how you use it, pick if you beat one guy and then beat another, pick if you beat a guy then pass. That's you. Make that decision. We'll talk about it. We may have a discussion, but I don't put, when we say the only non-negotiable part of that move was you're going to get squared up. Or if you can't get squared up, we would begin to teach decisions that match that scenario. So if I can't get squared up, I'm not taking the guy one-on-one. I'm going to find a teammate who is in a better position to take on a player one-on-one. And now you begin to introduce passing analysis, and now you start to, it's the basics, but you start to get into the problem solving. And what you end up getting is these kids start stringing these things together, and it looks very creative, but we would say, look, don't get me wrong, there's a creative part to it, but there is a very disciplined part at the key ingredient.
Yeah, and I'm going to stop apologizing for the podcast going on. You let me know if you have a hard stop. But, man, every time you speak, I got something else. See, one of the criticisms would be, oh, well, you're saying that you wanted a defender, but you might actually say that's good, to go 1v1 in front of goal against 2 kids. And what I heard, and you tell me, is eventually they should be able to recognize the situation, right, and then make the right decision. But you're not using some abstract notion of what the right decision is.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of problems that we have in social media conversations in the blogosphere is it's so general that we need to really dig into what does a decision look like? What are the calculuses? What are the stimuli that you are expecting them to look at to make decisions? And oh, by the way, this is happening in a microsecond.
Yeah. And we go through a phase. It's kind of a fun one for me. I normally coach the older kids, but a lot of times I like coaching some of the really young kids, not really young, but I'll say like 8 to 10, 8 to 11. I like coaching in that range because you get some kids that say, okay, once you start doing moves, and then we'll put in a phase where we say the concept is find the dribbler. Maybe the dribbler is you. Do you have, and we just say, look, if you're the dribbler, you'll know it. There's one player in front of you, not two. We're not going 1v3. We're not going 1v8. We're going 1v1. Is there one player and he's dead center? And we always say 12 o'clock. You put him on 12 o'clock. So if you kind of, that's what we would, how we would reference it. If you can do that, then you're the dribbler. Let's go. If you're not that, if that's the only thing, if I don't have one guy, or maybe I have one guy, but he's at 9 o'clock and I don't believe I can turn and get squared up on him. Okay, your job now, find the dribbler. And the nice thing is we're not switching gears. We're not shifting into some abstract thing. Everything we're talking about is simple decision-making about dribbling. Either you're the dribbler or your teammate is. Okay, figure out real quick if it's you. If it's not you, let's find the one who is. Who has the best chance to dribble his guy? And you slowly work through that. And the kids start moving the ball. And what you end up finding is kids start switching play. Kids start dropping balls out. Kids start doing all these more dynamic movements of soccer. And they're not doing it because they understand, well, we're penetrating space and open, like, none of that stuff. They go, we'd freeze the game, freeze. Okay, it's not you. Good. Okay, we've decided that. Take a look around. You think Timmy over there? What about Steve? What about Shaquille over there? Whoever. And then they go, well, I think that kid. Good, let's get him the ball. How do we get him the ball? Well, I could kick it really hard to him. Okay, what's another way? Maybe I could dribble part way. Yeah, maybe I could use this middle guy and he could give it to him. Love it. I love it. Let's start trying them. See which one works best. And then let's get it to him and see if that guy can do a move for our team. Done.
All right. So that was enjoyable, man. And that's really cool. So let's now fast forward to Germany. You went there as a military. The story was you went there in the military and then you asked, could you play, right? How did that work?
Yeah. So I got over there. You could always just kind of try and sneak into local games and stuff like that. I played. So when I was in the military, I went to Air Force Academy. So I played at Air Force Academy. So I'd already kind of played through the college days. Went over there and hopped in as many pickup games as I could, just anything, just wanted to play. And had a couple people mention to me, hey, have you ever thought about playing pro? And really at the time, I go, no, because I'm in the military. It's a nice story, but I don't know how that's ever going to happen. Had a couple chances where some teams said, hey, we'll sign you. Came and saw me at just a local game or a small game. And I said, we'll sign you, but how does that work with the military? And of course, I did ask one time, and the military came up with some number that they just made it up. They go, sure, if they want to buy you for $600,000, we'll let you out of your commitment. At the time, no one was paying $600,000 for pretty much anybody, American soccer player for sure. So that was never going to happen. So I just kind of kept touching and dabbling with it as often as I could and as high as I could, but it was really nothing that you would call professional. And then military had drawbacks. And so this is all kind of end of Desert Storm and all this stuff. And so there were cutbacks. And so they came back to me and said, well, you used to have that soccer stuff on the table. And I said, what happened? And you check into it and kind of the offer was on the table. We'll start you a team lower. You got to work your way up kind of thing. And basically I was like, all right, do I want to go kick soccer balls around or do I want to get shot at and have explosion? I go, I'm going to choose the soccer option. I've had enough of this other one. So I went that route and I brought a lot of stuff that the military had kind of beat into me. Hardest working kid. I had talent tactically. In the military, tactical stuff was my thing. Like that's what separated me was a lot of the tactics and doing it under pressure. So that stuff translated big time. Like I came in and that was always my foot in the door. They always say you got to have some kind of foot in the door at the pro level. My foot in the door was I probably understood the tactics even better than some of the Germans did. And so, which everyone of course found very odd because they're, at the time there just weren't any Americans and their belief was none of you can play anyway. So to have an American over here that was suddenly running through tactics and directing players on the field was strange to them.
In which position did you play?
So I played two positions. I played number 8, so I was center mid. That's where I played the most of my life. But I also played goalkeeper, and that was it was a weird story. But Air Force Academy, I kept trying to get them to see me, and that was the only school I wanted to go to. Like I know they always tell everybody you got to apply to a bunch, and I told my parents I had applied to a bunch, but I didn't. I had applied to one. Put all my eggs in one basket. Wasn't connecting. Finally, Air Force was at the tournament my club was at, and we only had one goalkeeper. And the game before they were coming, our keeper goes down, and they go, well, Brett plays the most sports, played football, played basketball, all from back in that day. So they go, so he's got to be it. And I'm like, oh, come on, guys. Air Force guys they're finally here. They're like, sorry. So the coach ended up, I played well, ironically, with no training, but just played well. We still lost, but the coach said, "What?" He goes, "I thought you said you were a midfielder," and I go, "Yeah, I am." I go, He goes, "Well, you're gonna have fun with this one. I'll recruit you as a goalkeeper," and I go, "Oh, you kidding? You're kidding me, man." So my dad was laughing as soon as I told him that story. He's like, "Boy, that's gonna be a hard one." He goes, I literally he'd never seen me play goalkeeper at all. He wasn't at that tournament. So he goes, I have nothing to say on this whole decision at all. So yeah, it was hilarious. But I ended up being lucky because when I got to Air Force and I started playing goalkeeper, I had no bad habits because I had no habits. I had none. So I was a total blank slate, and I learned quick, and the coach was really good. So it was one of those things where I got really good at that. And so the Germans tended to believe they would kind of believe that an American goalkeeper, like that fit their story of believability. And so they put me in, but that's where I played with the teams. But it was funny because I would tell coaches, I'm actually more of a midfielder, and they would always go, every goalkeeper thinks they're a field player. Like, just stop. They finally put me in a game with the reserve team. I scored 3 goals and had an assist. I go, I told you. But it was, so at that level it was a lot of directing people, and it kind of fit into some strength for me because it was a lot of the directing the teams, and because I had field skills way before that was ever popular, like I was way out of the box playing and supporting, and I was directing a lot of the offensive stuff. So it was that kind of experience for me. I mean, I loved it. It was a great experience. Loved every minute of it.
But what was the name of the club, or at least one of the clubs, so we can understand?
So they started me lower with a club called FC Schoenberg, and then moved up VFR Lübeck, and then most of my time was around TB Berlin. But I had some commitments with the military there, so it was kind of a weird experience at TB Berlin. I was still doing some work for the military at the time, and so it was a lot more of, honestly, like what the best way to describe me was probably a practice player. I was permanently there. I was involved. They ended up getting me into coaching. So that's where I first started coaching. But it was a weird experience because I was pro, but not really. So it's hard for me to say that, were you full pro at that level? Honestly, no. I was there. I did get offered a contract from at that level, but I couldn't because of some of my commitments that I still had on contract with the military. So it was one of those things where I in my head, I was like, all right, I was good enough for me because I proved I could play at that level. And that was a big thing to me. I just wanted to prove I could play at that level. So I had proved it. I had the contract offered, but when people said, did you play, this long history at that level? No, I mean, I really didn't, but I was there. And that's definitely where all my knowledge and insights into the game came from. It came from that experience.
So let's talk about that as we wrap it up. Let's talk about that. So what age level did you coach in Germany? Like, tell us how you started coaching, because I want to use that to then compare it to what you see in the States.
Yeah, so they started me at the 11s and 12s, and the coach's philosophy on how to bring up coaches, he said the 11s and 12s was a crossroads in their methodology.
Okay, but let me cut you off there to say, were you at 11s and 12s at an academy? So this was their academy that's feeding into their pro team?
Yes.
And then how did the conversation, because when you started coaching, were you still attached to the military?
Yeah, I was basically a contractor at that point, so doing some work with them. So it was, they started every coach out the same way, more as an assistant coach. Like, you start as an assistant coach, you get attached to a head coach. Our director was pretty involved with your education. So you kind of had two masters. You had the head coach that you're working with, and then you had him. And he was kind of in charge of your overall development. And then the head coach was in charge of whatever you were trying to get out of that specific environment.
And were you speaking German then? Or how did that work?
Yeah, it was probably sloppy German, but yeah. Yeah, it was. I think I went from where when I would try to speak German, not only did they know I was not German, they knew I was American speaking really bad German, because they'd go, "Oh, you're American," and they'd switch to English a lot of times. I'm like, "Really, that bad? Like you didn't maybe think I was from Canada? Maybe like like it was just that bad." And I got to a point where they would ask, "Where are you from?" And they would mean, "Where are you from in Germany?" And I go, "That's progress for me." That's
real progress.
They thought I was from some weird part and just had a messed up dialect. But so that was at the end, and so it took a while. That didn't come super easy to me.
So how would you describe the style of play that the club wanted their 11s and 12s or the youth players to play?
So it was definitely total football. It's kind of a Cruyff, Michel's kind of vein of soccer. A lot of thinking. They believed in that kind of Renaissance man. I want you to be good at skills. I want you to be good at this. I want you to be good at that. And it was a lot of, we prioritize decision making. And I know a lot of people say that, but that's where for me, now when you compare, okay, so I came from an environment where decision making, there were very specific components. And then when you go see these other clubs, and they'd also say, well, we believe in decision making. Well, everyone believes in it. But then you go watch your training and you go, but there's either very little decision making or there's very little structure you're putting to your decision making to where you could ever repeat it.
So, all right. So, total football philosophy, style of play, I should say, and a heavy emphasis on decision making, but understanding the components of decision making. What would that look like in an actual practice session?
So a lot of it for us was, and this is where I kind of had a leg up. There's a military kind of decision making matrix called OODA Loop. This was by Colonel Boyd. It's
spell that?
Yeah, OODA. And this was developed by a guy named Colonel Boyd. Colonel Boyd invented this for pilots when they were learning how to dogfight. And then they end up finding out this is really just a decision-making process in a competitive environment. So the whole military ended up using it, pilot or not. And then you've seen it since then go out, and it's gone into the corporate world. It's gone into, so this thing is still running around free. But he said basically there is a sequencing to decision-making. And the letter stood for observe, orient, decide, and act. And then you kind of repeat. But the way that we would teach in the military was this, the reason it was a loop, we called it a loop. The loop was, I have the two loops are going to come in conflict with each other. The guy who moves through his loop quicker or can slow down the loop of the other, the end result is I'm going to make more decisions than you are. And at some point you cannot keep up with, I've made 3 decisions, you've made 2. I've made 6, you've made 4, so forth and so on. And at some point, the differential creates gaps and mistakes. And this was really what a lot of the soccer had, but I said, I can bring a structure to some of that you're teaching anyway. And so a lot of it was orient, which was basically vision, perception. And so when we would start talking about, for example, a kid wanting to move a ball up the field, and we would say, if you move that ball straight vertical, I get a lot of progress. We'll say you get an A for progress, but you get an F for deception. There's no deception to that at all. That is, I'm coming forward. Okay. If I take that ball straight sideways, you get an A for deception because it doesn't make sense. You're shifting, you're moving around, but you're not making progress to goal. So you get an A for deception, but you get an F for progress. And then what you end up finding so you find that 45-degree angle. And now you're talking what a lot of people have found within soccer when they're kind of talking about soccer geometry. That 45-degree angle is that blend between progress and deception. And this is where I think currently a lot of the U.S. teams they'll say break lines, superiority, and they'll say it, but I go, what you end up doing is you force the kid to go vertical, and you take away all deception. And so the defense knows you're coming. So the same guys will usually tell you, but I believe in numerical superiority. Then my question to them is usually, then why are you dragging the entire defense over to the right and then going straight through them? Because you're outnumbered. Like you're outnumbered 9-7, 7-3, whatever. So at what point did you say numerical superiority doesn't matter? Because by going forward into them, at some point you run out of numbers. But we can now work with kids and we'd say, look, so we would put, for example, and I'm talking about young kids, but how we would work on decision making. I'd put a line right down the middle of the field, just divide it left and right. And so we would tell the kids, you need to decide at all times of the game, advance or deceive. Advance or deceive, advance or deceive. And so the only way to do this, I have to see, I can only choose between A and B if I can see A and B. If you face straight forward, you can see A, you can't see B. If you face straight sideways, you can see B, you can't see A. So I have to, and we would say this line, if you can see this line, you can see both options. And so we would get the kids, get the ball, see the line, get the ball, see the line. And now we're just forcing them to turn their eyes in the direction where both choices are now possible. And then at that point, kind of like before when I said, this part's non-negotiable, you're going to get that ball, you're going to orient towards that line. Now make a decision. Well, should I attack? Should I deceive? Yeah, that's up to you. Even if you're wrong, that's up to you. Pick, and we'll talk about it.
Brilliant. So from a defense, using that same scenario defensively, what are you teaching them to counter this?
Don't let them see the line.
Simple.
Yeah, it's simple. Super simple.
Hey, my wife, she don't listen to the podcast, but I always throw her under the bus. Even she'll understand this. I'm like the Columbo of youth soccer when it comes to this. I talk about her, but she's so uninterested in this that you'll never see her. But even she can understand this. So if she's coaching a rec team, don't let them see the line. That's your defensive principle.
That's how they start. And I remember our director used to come and tell the kids, he goes, kids, this is a really simple thing. When we're teaching you one thing, we're teaching you two things. So if I'm teaching you offense, I'm also teaching you defense. And I would listen. He goes, look, there's only one thing that both teams want to have happen. That is 22 players leave the game alive. That's it. After that, there is not a single thing that one team wants that the other team also wants. So he goes, whatever they want. So offense, we tell the offense dribbler, we want you to square up. Defense, guess what you don't want? Don't let him square up. Offense, we want you to see the line. Defense, don't let him see the line.
Man, I'm about to invite you back on for another one. So let's now, in the last 2 or 3 minutes, fast forward to the States.
Okay.
What are you seeing? You could tell us some context about where you started, what level, so we can understand. And then how did you say, okay, I can take some of the experiences that I had and improve the situation?
So I did, some of the normal stuff I got involved with just some clubs in trying to build like a single club and help them out. And then we had a lot of requests just from people. They either see the team, hey, would you share that information? Yeah, I stole it all anyway. So, I mean, it's not mine. So you can have it. And then we would go, and then it kind of morphed into, hey, if we hired you, would you come in and consult? Would you come in and teach our coaches this methodology, blah, blah, blah. So it slowly shifted into this consulting business for a number of years where we would come in and I had some friends in the Green Berets on that side. And so they had a thing that to be honest, was really what hooked me on the consulting idea. Green Berets, and for people that don't know exactly what they do, they tend to go in and they're masters of unconventional warfare. But their main thing is to not go in and fight like the SEALs. Their job is to go in and teach the locals how to fight and build a resistance or build, that kind of stuff. And they have a principle that I have been intrigued with ever since I read about it. And it was called positive deviation. And positive deviation was, for them, was they would go in and say, a lot of the stories started in Vietnam when they really started playing this. And they would say they go into the villages and they would try to teach them how Americans would fight the Viet Cong. And it wouldn't work. They'd even give them weapons and all kinds of stuff and teach them the U.S. tactics, and it wouldn't work. And he said what they ended up deciding was there was a mental disconnect. Well, that works for the Americans, or that works in the U.S., but we're not them. It'll never work for us. So what they ended up finding was it was really hard, and that was kind of that Six Sigma, right? We're going to find something that works, we're going to package it up, and then we're going to go sell it around the world. Well, that never really worked, and it never really seemed to deal with any of the major problems. So they said what the Green Berets found out was positive deviation. You go there and you go and get involved with the local community and find one group. There could be 100 villages fighting the Viet Cong and 99 are failing, but one is having success. Go find out what they're doing and then teach that to the 99. And so that was been a big component of how I worked with clubs, because I came in and they're like, are you going to give us a list of drills? Are you going to give us? I said, look, I'll give it to you, but look, if it was a list of drills that was suddenly going to make you better coaches, like everyone, you can go on the internet and buy 1,001 drills nowadays. Half of them you can get for free. So I go, it's not the drills, but we need to find what you're good at. We need to find the little successes you are having, and we'll fill it in with some of the glue. We'll redirect it. But I go, you already have the answers here. Most of the time, you really do. You have the answers here inside your organization. We just have to redirect it a little bit, put a little structure, put a little accountability inside of it. And a lot of these clubs can't actually do it themselves. The challenge has been, and this is where I think the U.S. is, the challenge has been it is presented as being so nebulous and so subjective, and I think it's an inaccurate assessment. I think it's there is a lot more objectivity to the game than what most people think. I think there are better ways where instead of a coach trying to be so creative, I go there's a belief that discipline can unlock creativity and unleash it. And I go, I think that would be where some of the clubs, because right now you have all these guys, for as creative as the sessions are, for how many licenses they got, you still watch these clubs and you go, all right, so at the end of your primary window, 12 years old, 13 years old, the one thing that should be true that's pretty much most of the world will agree on, your skills should be on point. Your skills is what allows you to delve into tactics or limit those tactics. So if you get to 13 and your skills are still very, very low, that club has missed the boat. Like you are forever limited. And now even if you go back and double down and try and learn it, it takes you 2 to 3 times to learn what you could have been learning from 8 to 12. So you're going to spend all this time now trying to recapture these skills that you didn't hit. And now that time pushes out tactics. So you really can't get into it. So I think this is the cycle that I see. And you see happen with a lot of clubs all over the country. Like you go watch them, you go, you're really paying $2,000, $3,000, and your kid can barely control the ball. Like somewhere, I don't know the progression. I don't know that club's progression, but somewhere between 8 and 14, it should have been a priority for a couple months that you can control the ball.
So let me throw something at you, and it's in the consulting vein. I've said this as Mr. Google search, but from my own professional experience, I kind of feel like the role of the coach, and this is sacrilegious when I speak to coaches or communicate online, and I even have to qualify it. God, if what I'm about to say is going to make you not support Anytime Soccer Training, turn it off right now.
Turn it off.
Warning alert. The role of the coach, I think, in many cases, needs to be more narrow. That we're asking coaches to do almost everything for a club, for a team, and manage all the parents and the gaming program and the play metrics or team snap or whatever, and the evaluations, all this stuff. And they can't focus on the basics. And I just think it's nebulous. So you'll give them, and people will say, I worked in education, so they'll say, I used to work, managed instruction, where you kind of know what you want them to do and you just get them to execute, or let them have their own autonomy. We can have that debate. But what I'm basically saying is even Arsene Wenger can't do everything.
Right.
And I think there's an opportunity, and this is the analogy I'll use. And I know you're going to be agreeable, but you can laugh me out of the room. The analogy I would use is if I'm going to go to a coaching conference and there are 10 booths, do I want one person presenting at each 10 booths? So I'm with a group leader and they present this concept, then they have to present this concept, and they have to present this concept, just basic specialization. Or do I want each person to focus on one particular concept and then maybe they collaborate later on their booths? Because I feel like we kind of need, if we got 3 coaches, we really need to split this stuff up to say it's 3 teams, but you're really focused on this technical stuff. And that's what we're going to hold you accountable for. You're
Yep.
focused on this and you're focused on that. But then we're going to collaborate as well, right? So that so there's overlap, but I just don't feel like that's enough of that is happening.
No, and that's where, so you get into, and this is the fact that you were a teacher, you have great insight on this. Because people would say, is there for example, when people would ask me, normally they'd ask me where one coach follows a team from 8 to 18. And I would say, well, look, this is a school, just like anywhere else. This club is a school. It's a learning environment. Are there any schools where a teacher works with an 8-year-old to 18-year-old? Yes. If you're out in the middle of the country where there's a one-room schoolhouse and that's all you got and you have no resources, that does happen. But if you're in the city, my 3rd grade math teacher doesn't follow me to 4th grade. My 4th grade math teacher doesn't come with me to 5th grade. Like, they are integrated. There is overlap. The 5th grade teacher is expecting the 4th grade teacher to deliver certain competencies so that I can carry on my job. And that's the curriculum. And that's the thing where a lot of clubs will use the word curriculum, but they don't know it. And so it's that curriculum is what allows you to be the expert over there. I'll be the expert over here. And this is how we integrate in a manner that benefits the child.
And let me throw something else at you on this education tip. And I was more in the admin side, just for the record, but we looked at all the different schools as part of the program, looked at so many different schools, and we saw that there are a zillion ways of doing it. But the one common theme that a lot of them had was they really got literacy right at those early stages. And then all the other classes, whether it be math, science, language arts, still had a literacy component. And they use the other areas, the other subjects, to really challenge the child's literacy skills while also teaching that subject.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like I hate to say this kind of stuff because I'm not qualified, but I kind of feel like technical ability at those early ages is that thing. And so your what you would consider to be your possession, I'm just throwing this out there, your 1v1, your decision making, all of those areas, the person that's ultimately responsible for technical ability is helping design those curriculums around that.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. I mean, let the experts be the expert. Kind of back to your first point. Let them go be excellent at what they're excellent at. And don't ask them to do these 6 extra jobs that they're really not very good at, probably not very motivated. You know, I mean, like, I'll try to push coaches to expand into those areas, but I won't expect it from the beginning. Like, and I believe a little bit in that Renaissance man approach. So I think at the end of the because the coach is on a journey too. And so at the end of the coach's journey, I want you to be into more areas than what you're currently in. I want you to be good at running team snap. I want you, whatever. I want you to be good at that if you're not good at it. Or giving feedback, I want you to be good at that. You're not good at it now. That's part of your curriculum. But, and I'll still say and probably appreciate this as a teacher, the best way to teach a kid is to model it. So if the coach isn't going to expand in these uncomfortable areas, well, why should the kid? I know you're telling me to do it, but I don't see you expanding in these uncomfortable areas. So,
well,
all this stuff comes together.
I'll end with my soapbox on this. And if we're going to ask the coach to manage the entire curriculum for that team, we absolutely got to give them the resources. If 100%. We're going to ask the coach to navigate these tough relationships with parents, then we got to help them with that. You can't just say, because what happens with these conversations is the 20-year veteran coach who is a little older than the average parent will say, no, I deal with this. I let my parents know no nonsense. Yeah, but the reality is that 25-year-old just came out of college. He didn't get into coaching a fight with a 48-year-old who thinks his son is the next Messi.
Right,
And so we
right.
can't put him into that. It's not necessarily fair to put them into that situation without giving them the resources to be successful there.
I'll tell you, in kind of a way that we put where the rubber hit the road, where we've advised a lot of staff. So we would put them into 2-year age bands, and we would put head coaches for the coach of the program. But then we would put a technical staff over that program. And how we define that technical staff. Here's your role. You've got, let's say, 4 coaches in your age band. Coach 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they all have their teams. And whether they're first team, second team, however you got them divided up. But the reality is you have 4 coaches with different abilities. And maybe one's just, like you said, maybe one's fresh off the press college and he's still learning the ropes. And he can demonstrate, but he can't explain. And then you got another one that's maybe been coaching for 10 years. Your job, and this is a quasi bridge to the business side of it, all of these kids have paid the same. And we as a club have professed to deliver these qualities. So I can't leave it up to the randomness of the coaches. So your job is to be the guy that levels off each glass. The guy that's been doing this for 10 years, he doesn't need that much help. You can maybe just observe and be a resource for him. The kid that is brand new and doesn't know quite how to do it, but he can demonstrate it, you may have to go hop in on those practices physically. And you're running the session and he's demonstrating for 3 months. And then he blends out and begins to teach. I mean, you may have a different role as a staff. The cool thing is now you're developing staff. You are delivering, even though my coach, let's say I'm twins and my brother's on one team and I'm on the other. Well, he's on the team with a 10-year coach. He's getting 90% from that one coach. He's getting 90% of everything the club promised. I go to my team. My coach is a super nice guy, but he's only able to deliver 30%. But we're both paying the same. But that technical staff now comes in and fills in the technical staff. Your job is fill in the rest of the glass. If he's at 30, you're 70. And your goal is you need to get all these guys up to 80. So you're only 20%, 20%, 20%. And that's how we'll run this. But your job is to fill in the gaps so that coach can't.
All right. So the last question on this then, but the way you're thinking about it now, and I know it's going to be so many experiences, not just in Germany, but how does that? So what I heard from you when we started comparing the U.S. to Germany was being a little bit more clear. So Germany was a little bit more your experience, a little bit more clear and broke down these lofty, nebulous terms and objectives into actionable steps. Then
Yep.
you have and concepts. Then you have your military experience, and then you have your playing experience, and then the experience of just consulting clubs. But as it stands right now, if when you came over from Germany to the U.S., just to put it in a bow, was it the intensity of the practice sessions? Was it the attention to detail? Was it the level of the players they were working with? Was it the fact that the German academy wouldn't have been like massive compared to the bigger clubs? Was it all the above? This is the last question. So if you had to
Yeah.
put in a bow, like what were you seeing as a big difference in general? What were you seeing?
So I would say if you kind of work through those different silos, physically, I actually thought we were on par and in certain ages exceed what the Germans were doing. So physically, that was never really our problem. Technically, I will say now you kind of doing a time thing. Technically, when I first came back, we were behind. Now we are behind systemically. So we're still across the board, rank and file kids playing the game, we're still way behind. Some of the high-end kids that are now getting that specialized attention, I would say they're close to what the German kids were. So that gap has been closed, but only for a very small few kids that have happened to, win the lottery and get in front of the right system and coach. The big one for me is the decision-making. And these kids were being asked to do the basics of decision-making and see the connection between that skill and the decision, or the decision and the skill. and how that decision, like it was from the beginning. These kids were getting, and so when people, like when I see these articles every now and then, like, oh, we're kind of the same as these other countries, and then at 16 it changes, and I go, you didn't look close enough. At 16, the gap became noticeable, but that gap is a result of changes that were happening at 8 to 10 years old. Those kids were working through decision making, and you get into this, and this is one thing that I think is something the U.S. is going to have to tackle at some point, because right now I really have clout as a club by winning. I won a state championship. I produced this many college kids. I blah 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 blah. So everyone's on this big, and most of the coaching incentives, you go around the country, if you win this, you get a bonus. If you win that, you get a bonus, which is completely antithetical towards development in some ages, especially. So what you see is you go to these games, and I walk away from the majority of games. I'm talking like MLS Next games. That's because that's kind of where I've been spending my time. ECNL games, it's the same. From the ages of 10 to 16, I generally will tell you most of the teams are playing faster than their brain is able to process. So the feet are going faster than the brain is a really bad way to learn. Because now I win by not going outside my comfort zone. I win by doing what I am comfortable, doing it very fast. And so I really am just not learning as much. Whereas in Germany, these kids were not, it wasn't all high press. It wasn't, everything's got to be sprints and flying down the field at 1,000 miles an hour. It was slowing the game down, thinking, analyzing, looking, and we'll speed it up later, but we always want accuracy first and speed second. And here in the US, the problem is I get the next check by doing speed. If I hyper press and just get the fastest kids on the planet and I condition, the hell out of them, are we going to win? Yes, we're going to win. Not because of good soccer. And so you kind of look at, even for me now, I look at the end result. Like our club, every club did their own different way, but I visited other pro clubs, and Spanish do this a lot as well. But our German club said there are 332 skills and concepts that you have to be competent at to have a chance to go pro. You have to be highly competent at 332. They broke it down. And then, and I visit other clubs and they'd have similar but different numbers. I go, that's interesting because I never heard it that way. And then you come back, and now when people ask me, well, what do you think about some of these high-level kids that you've seen either at MLS academies or top-level kids like that? And I said, here's the thing. Those kids are just as much expert as the German kids. The difference is they're expert at 50 to 60. And the rest are low to middle. And so that's the end result of time allocation from, say, 10 to 18. You hyper-focused on those 50 to 60 things, and those kids are killer at it. They're as good as anybody in Europe, okay? But only at the expense of not being very good at these other, 170 things. Whereas in Germany or France or Spain or Italy, you go through, they have kind of taken on the task. We need to be good at 300 and whatever their number is, and we only have 10 years to get that done.
I said last question, but I got to ask you this. But how much of that delta between the 350 do you think, and we just having a conversation, I know there's no finite number, is because of the culture and what the kids are doing beyond what they're doing inside of their academy?
It's part of it because, those kids are, when they show up on your doorstep, say at an academy, so they don't show up till probably, 8 to 12, somewhere there. Those kids already show up with, I can tell you in general, compared to, say, an American kid, thousands of more touches on the ball. They've already been watching the game weekly with their dad, their uncle, their cousin, their mom, and they're having conversations. So they show up, and a lot of this stuff that they already have a very anchored knowledge of. Maybe it's got to be refined. Maybe, there's little details missing, but they have a good knowledge of it. And they've been doing monkey see, monkey do. So they see guys making overlaps, and they want to make overlaps, not because they understand the effect on space, but because they saw a cool guy on TV do it. So they want to do it. And so you have all those kids already doing those things at those ages. So now you're just tweaking it, helping them control it a little bit better. Here, you're usually teaching it. Like you are teaching from the beginning. This is what this is. And it's just a difference, I'll give one last example. So my wife is from Bolton, England. And so we went back, and she played with Bolton Wanderers. So we went back, and I ran a clinic for their girls' side. And they asked, would you work with the little girls for a session? Yeah, sure, no problem. So 10-year-old girls. And I went and I said, hi, I'm Brett, blah, blah, blah. I go, who here are a fan of Bolton Wanderers? And of course, they all raise their hand, right? And I go, who here goes to a game? And I'm thinking in my head, I go, oh, maybe 5 or 6. All of them. Hand goes up. I go, who here? Who's got a favorite player? Boom. All of them had a player, someone different, most of them. And then this one, I go, who knows anything about the team you're playing this weekend? And this little girl, 9-year-old girl, right? She goes, we're playing this guy. The manager just came in a month ago. They have a defender that got injured, so they're bringing in this guy that came from Portugal. Blah, blah. She just starts giving me a full. I go, oh. Like, so this kid, that's probably happening with mom and dad, right? I'm assuming, but if you come over and ask the 16-year-old kid that, like out here, so earthquakes they couldn't even name the starting lineup. They wouldn't be able to. And they couldn't tell you anything about, well, this kid came from there and this coach is there. They couldn't tell you any of that stuff. And I go, so that's a cultural thing, right? As part of that engine, I don't think there's anything in the water. I don't think there's anything in the DNA. I don't believe any of that stuff. I think the engine that chases it is just a little more beefed up engine because of the culture. But I go, it's the same thing I see here, like from New York. It's the same thing I saw with basketball players. It was that same engine. It's no different. It's just here it was basketball, and you see it in certain parts of the country. We went down to Texas and it was football, right? So those kids had that same engine. So I go, so once again, I don't think it's anything special about this group or this country or that country. I don't think any of that's true. I think we have it. We just haven't found a way to attach that engine to soccer for a lot of families yet.
Man, this has been great. So in conclusion, where are you at now? What are you doing?
So I am out in California, up in Northern California, just outside Bay Area. I am running a private academy to where we work with kids in the tiers. They top level kids, they still keep on their MLS Next team or their ECNL team or their GA team for the girls. We work with the mid-range kids that are just mostly, a lot of that is going to be skill work and foundational. So I'm doing a lot of that, building towards what I'm hoping to do is get a residency program set up. And part of if everything would end up the way I want, we would have a small campus, because I've got all these coaches through the Cruyff Institute Network, through that University of Barcelona master's degree. You got all these guys that have all this wealth of information that are curious or outright interested in coming over to the United States to engage and be part of the process of kind of bringing the U.S., onto the stage. And what I propose back to them is, if I can get that built, that will be your platform. That's your platform to begin engaging the American. And I would love it, because it would be education from players to coaches to front office to support staff to everything. That's what I would love, is kind of one mecca of learning and to be able to do it.
Brett, man, bro, you should have charged us for this podcast, because you dropping some serious nuggets. And I hope that folks are in that Northern California area who are interested in your private academy. I think that's part of where we're going to go, where we have folks really, I call them soccer schools, like they did in Brazil back in the day. Yep. Soccer schools that really prepared you for those academies, because once you get into those academies, you know the deal. So you want a soccer school that's more nurturing, understanding. You don't have that same level of pressure preparing you for the actual academy. So I like that. And I'm going to ask people to reach out to you. You're in the Facebook group as well. So if people have questions, they can reach out to you. If they have children or are interested, they can reach out to you, man. This has been extremely helpful. I have a clinic tonight. I'm gonna draw the straight line and teach use that to teach defensive principles. Because as a parent, I've always said that one of the things I wanted to be able to do is communicate very clearly to my children. And that is the clearest way I have ever heard. It's so simple that it's embarrassing. I'll give you credit for it if I when I use it. I might not use it right. Maybe I'll send a video, but it's the clearest way of, how they say, pick a side and drive them. It's so easy now for the child to understand.
Yeah.
So I'm going to steal that one from you. And I'm definitely gonna steal that one from you. So I really appreciate it, man. Guys, this has been Neil Crawford, the founder of Anytime Soccer Training, and also the host of the Inside Scoop. This has been a wonderful conversation, guys. Let's get better together.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil.